There was a morning, not long ago, when my son sat across from me at the breakfast table, and I realized I had no idea what was going on in his life. Not the surface things, the real things. And what frightened me was not that realization itself. What frightened me was that I could not remember exactly when that had become normal. My name is Harold. I'm 83 years old, and somewhere between his childhood and mine growing old, my son became a stranger to me, without either of us ever choosing it. I want to talk about that because I do not think I am the only father who has lived inside that quiet. Daniel was born in the spring of 1974. I remember the drive to the hospital like it happened last week. I remember the exact weight of him when the nurse placed him in my arms for the first time. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. I remember thinking that I had never held anything so important in my life, and that I would spend every day making sure he knew that. And for a while I did. When he was small, we were close in the way that fathers and young sons are close when the world is still simple. I drove him to Little League on Saturday mornings. We watched football together on Sunday afternoons with the volume too loud, and snacks his mother disapproved of. He used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides, and I would drive slower than I needed to just to keep him there a little longer. I was not a perfect father. I worked long hours. There were school plays I missed and dinners I came home late to, but I loved him deeply, and I genuinely believed that he knew that. I believed that love, if it is real enough, does not need to be constantly spoken, that it lives in the background of a life and does not require tending every single day. That belief, I think, was where the distance began. It did not happen the way you might imagine. There was no argument that cracked things open, no moment where voices were raised and something was said that could not be taken back. It was quieter than that, far quieter. It happened the way a room slowly fills with dust when no one is paying attention. You do not notice it while it is happening. You only notice it when the light hits a certain way one afternoon and you look around and think, when did it get like this? Daniel was around 14 or 15 when I first felt something shift, though I did not have a name for it at the time. He stopped coming to find me when he got home from school. He started spending more time in his room. I told myself it was adolescence. I told myself every father goes through this, that boys pull away from their fathers when they are becoming men, and that this was natural and temporary and would pass. It did pass in a way. He grew up, he became polite, respectful, responsible. He went to university, built a career, married a good woman, had children of his own. By every visible measure, we had a fine relationship. We had Sunday phone calls, we had holidays together. There were photographs on the mantle that looked like a close family because we were, in the way that most families understand the word, but somewhere in all of that, the real conversation had stopped. I do not mean arguments or confessions. I mean the kind of talking where you say what is actually on your mind, where you admit to being afraid or lost or uncertain, where you ask a question and actually wait for the answer. That kind of talking, the kind Daniel and I had done naturally when he was 8 years old and the world was uncomplicated, had somewhere along the way quietly retired, and neither of us had called attention to its leaving. I remember one evening, maybe 10 years ago now, when Daniel came to visit with his family. We had a good dinner. The grandchildren were loud in the way that children are, which I loved. And after they had gone to bed and his wife had turned in early, Daniel and I sat together in the living room with the television on low. We sat there for almost an hour, and we said almost nothing, not because there was tension, not because either of us was angry, but because we simply did not know how to begin anymore. And the silence had become so familiar that neither of us thought to question it. I watched him drive away the next morning, and I had that feeling again, that low, unnameable feeling, like something important was right there in front of me and I kept failing to pick it up. What I understand now that I did not understand then is that closeness between a father and a son does not maintain itself. It requires deliberate, repeated, sometimes uncomfortable tending, and I had assumed for decades that the love we had built when he was small would simply hold, that it would stay warm on its own without anyone feeding it. I was wrong about that. Love holds. But closeness, real closeness, does not survive on assumption. I think about the questions I never asked him, what he was actually afraid of at 15, what he thought about his own life, his choices, whether he was happy in the deep and honest sense of the word. I never asked those things. I thought asking them would embarrass him or embarrass me. I thought real men in real families did not ask each other those kinds of things directly, so I stayed on the surface, and so did he, and the years went by, and the surface became the only place we knew how to meet. He is 50 now. We still speak. We still have holidays. He is a good son, and I believe he loves me. But there is a version of him, the interior version, the one that carries his fears and his private griefs and the questions he has never said aloud, that I have never met. And I am not sure he has ever met that version of me either. I do not tell you this to make you feel sorry for me. I tell you this because I suspect some of you are living inside a version of this right now, not the end of it, the way I am, but the middle of it, the part where the distance is still small enough that you could cross it, if you chose to, if you were willing to feel the awkwardness of trying. Do not wait for the right moment. There is no right moment. There is only the ordinary evening you are sitting in right now, with the person you love on the other side of a silence that neither of you made a decision to build, but that both of you have been quietly maintaining for longer than you realize. I would give a great deal to sit across from my son and say the things I never said, to ask the questions I thought were unnecessary, to tell him that I was proud not just of what he accomplished, but of who he is, plainly, without occasion, just because it is true. I am 83 years old, and what I know now is this. The greatest distances in a family are not created by anger. They are created by the accumulated weight of all the ordinary moments when connection was possible, and both people assumed it would keep. Do not assume. Say the thing. Ask the question. Sit in the awkward silence until it becomes something else, because one day you will look across a breakfast table at someone you have loved your entire life and realize that love was never the problem. Presence was. And presence, unlike love, has to be chosen again and again and again.